Hi, this is Ashish from developerhut.net and welcome to the fourth session of Into the Spring series, which is CSRF Protection in Spring. So, in this session, we will be going to create a very simple web project and we will see how we can enable or disable CSRF. We will also going to see how we can use CSRF token in REST-based application as well as in the form-based application where we have a form submit request. Now let's go ahead and see how we can use CSRF in the Spring. So let's get started by creating very simple Spring project. So we will be creating the Maven project. Language will be of course Java. The version we will be using for this session will be 3.3.4. Group ID will be com.developerhut.into the Spring. You can give any group ID. Then artifact ID will be Spring, let's say CSRF demo, right? And I will keep the package name short. Packaging will be of jar and version will be using 17. Let's add the dependencies. So we will be definitely require the web dependencies as this will be a web project. We will also require the security dependency as we are using the CSRF, right? So I will add the Spring security. Let's also add dev tool dependency. Let's create the project. Okay, so I have imported the project into the Eclipse. Now let's start creating a very simple controller. So I will say new, I will say class, I will say demo controller, right? And I will add this in the package controller, right? And let's say finish. Let's add with, let's start with the annotation at the rate rest controller, right? Okay, so now let's start creating some methods. So I will create four type of methods. I will say public, I will say which will of course return some string value. I will say get test. This will be of get mapping, right? And I will simply say return. I will say this is a get method, and I will say hello world, right? And let's finish this. Okay, I will simply say at the rate get mapping, right? So let's simply, I will just simply copy this. So we have very simple controller. Now let's try to run this application and see whether it's working or not. So our project is started. Now if you see, we are using anywhere Spring Security here, right? So Spring Security internally use by default some type of authentication, which is basic authentication. So we got a password for that, which is printed on console. We should not be using this in real-time production environment, but for test purpose, of course, you can use it. Now let's simply test the method. I will say http // localhost and port 8080, right? And if I, let's save this, if I try to send the request, we should get some response. But if you see, we are getting 401 unauthorized because as we see, we are using Spring Security internally using some authentication, right? So let's use this. This is a basic authentication. Let's see how we can configure this. So I copied the password, right? Let's go to the Postman and go to the authorization section. In auth type section, you can simply select the basic auth. Okay, username as the user, default name as the user. Let's add the password which is printed on a console and let's try to send the request now. And let's see if it's working, right? So this is working, right? Now let's save this and I will just try to call the post method now. I'll simply duplicate this. Now let's say this will be of course a post, right? We already have authorization in place. Now let's try to send the request and we are getting unauthorized, right? We have the correct username and password, but we are still getting unauthorized. If you try to execute the get again, we will get the response back. But for post, put, and delete, we won't get the response, right? So if I let me duplicate this. So here we are getting the 401 even for put and delete method as well, right? So why this is happening? Our get is working with the authorization. However, it is not working with the post and put and delete method, right? So if you see this carefully, get is not the state changing method, right? So it is not going to change the state on the server. This is what the basic HTTP rules say, right? However, post, put, delete is definitely going to change something on a server. For example, post is operation basically for edit and adding something, right? Delete is for deleting. Put is maybe adding some record on the server. So basically it is changing the state. So if you are changing the state, then in that case, you will definitely require some more kind of a security on the server. So Spring by default add the CSRF token. So it expect this token to be come from the source to the server, right? So whenever you are sending the request from a postman, you have to send the token as well. Now let's see how we can configure the CSRF token. Okay, so I will just simply stop the server and let's update this method a little bit. So I will say HTTP servlet request, right? So servlet request, I will say request. So CSRF token is by default generated, right? So how we can access this? So let's add the HTTP servlet request as a parameter, and I will just simply print the token instead of this. So I will say instead of this, I will say, let's say CSRF token. Okay, and let's print this token. How we can access this? So you can simply say request dot get attribute. Okay, and attribute name is underscore CSRF. Okay, and if you get this attribute, this basically attribute is the CSRF token object, right? So let's cast this object. So I will say here CSRF token, right? So this is the token object, and it should be this one, right? The ORG Spring Framework Security Web CSRF, right? And let's, once you cast this to the object, let's simply say dot get token. Okay, so this will get me a token. Let's save this and let's start the server. Let's run this again. So our server is started. Let's update the password and execute the get method. So I have updated the password. Let's execute this, and if we see, we will get the CSRF token. So this is basically the CSRF token which is generated by the application every time it gets the request, right? Now we will use this CSRF token in a post, put, and delete method as well, and we will see whether we are able to go through or not. Now, how we can add this in post? So simply just add one more parameter, which is x hyphen CSRF hyphen token, which all in capital. Let's go here, and I will just send this again, and I will just copy this, right? So this is the new token which is generated. I will just simply copy this and I will paste it here, right? And let's try to send a post, and yep, so post is working now, right? So this is how the CSRF token we have to use. So just make sure that you, if you are using Spring Security with basic authentication, you should add the password, right? Plus you should also use the CSRF if it is enabled, of course. So by default, CSRF is enabled on the server level. If you want to disable this, you have to disable this explicitly from your configuration. We will see that as well, right? And whenever if it is enabled, you just have to send the X CSRF token in the header of post, put, and delete. All the state changing method we can see. Now let's see how we can customize this CSRF in a next section. Okay, now let's see how we can simply customize this CSRF token, right? So let's create some security class. So I will say security config, right? And I would add this in the config package, right? Let's add the our annotation at the rate configuration, right? This is the one, and another is enable web security. Enable web security, right? Now, let's add the bean method. I will say @bean. Let's say public security filter chain, right? I will say security filter chain, and we'll add HTTP security as a parameter, right? Now, how we can provide security filter chain? By simply calling http.build. So we'll say return http.build, and we will also add the exception. Now let's configure this. So I will say http dot authorized request, right? And here I will say request. Let's add our lambda expression for all the requests. I will simply say request dot any request dot permit all. So I'm permitting all the requests, and we want to use the basic authentication, right? So I will say HTTP basic, right? And I will say customizer dot, and simply remove this. I will say customizer dot with default, right? So this will provide the basic authentication. Now, next is we will configure our basic CSRF, right? So we can configure this using CSRF method, right? We will add, let's say, C or lambda expression, and I will simply say, let's say if we want to ignore the CSRF for a specific URLs, right? So how we can do this? We will say C dot ignoring request matchers, right? So this method we will use, and we can add our request matcher here, right? So let's say if I want to ignore all the CSRF which is coming from the URL which has a pattern /white, right? So I will say white, and I will just simply, ignore the CSRF, right? Now let's save this. We need to add the bracket here, otherwise this won't work because this is the lambda expression, right? So save this, and let's see. Now let's add this mapping. So I will simply go our demo controller, and let's say I will add this to post mapping, right? So I will say value /y, right? So whenever we call a post method, CSRF should be ignored, and we should be able to access this method by default without any CSRF requirement, right? Now let's try to run this. So application started. I will simply update the password. So I have updated the password, and this is the new CSRF. So we are able to execute the get method. Now let's try to execute the post method, right? So post method, we have already updated the URL mapping, right? So I will say white, right? And let's remove the CSRF token, right? We don't require this as it is. Let's see if it works. I will send the request, and we are getting unauthorized because I haven't updated the password. So let me update the password here because basic authentication is still there, right? So update the password here, and let's try to send this, and yep, right? So you can see we are able to execute the post method without adding the CSRF token in the header param, right? I have disabled this, right? You can even remove this. I will just simply say, let's see if we can remove this. So let's save this, and let's try to send it again, and yes, it's working. We're able to get the response, right? So this is how we can customize our CSRF for a specific set of URLs, right? In case if you want to disable the CSRF completely, you can simply add two lines, which is CSRF dot disable. So this will disable your CSRF completely in your application, right? So this is how we can customize the CSRF at our end. Now let's see how we can even customize or use this CSRF token for those kind of requests which is coming from the web page instead of the REST controller. Let's see this in the next section. So now let's see how we can use the CSRF with the form submission kind of request. So I already created the code, and I will quickly walk you through. So basically we are using here a time leaf, right? So I have added the time leaf dependencies in the form.xml. Next, we have created one controller, which is form controller, and we created two mappings. So one is a get mapping with the form, which will show the very simple form request, and another is whatever the output of the form, we are sending some form submission request to this mapping, right? And this will simply get and process those data and show the response on the page. So if you see the CSRF form.html, which is as a part of this URL mapping, right? So I have created a very simple form which submit this form request to the submit mapping, right? And the success.html will only show the data. This is basically a get mapping and this is basically a post mapping, right? Now let's try to run this. So now let's start and test this. So I will start the application. Now let's try to access this form, right? So I will simply go here and I will say http:// localhost 8080/form, right? So this is the CSRF form. As this is the GET request, we don't require any CSRF, right? Now here we have data. Let's add some data. I will say test, right? And try to submit the form, right? Now if you see, when you try to submit the form, we are getting forbidden error. This is because we are not using the CSRF here, right? If CSRF is in place, then we will be able to submit this request properly. Now, how we can add the CSRF to this form, right? So let's go here. I will simply go to the CSRF form. So how we can add the CSRF in this form, right? Very simple. So I will just simply copy this and I will paste it, right? So now since we are using the time leaf, right? We already saw how we can retrieve the CSRF from the parameter, right? So whenever we are logging, Spring internally add this CSRF token in the form of a parameter. Okay, now let's use that. So I will simply go here and will simply add this. I will use the time leaf here. I will just remove this. We don't require, and I will say th, right? I already added the time leaf here. Okay, then what is the basically the name of the parameter here, right? So for that we have to use underscore CSRF, right? And dot parameter name. This is the parameter name, which is underscore CSRF, right? Which we saw in our earlier demo controller, right? So this is the parameter name, right? And we can access its value. Very simple. We will add th colon value, right, equal to dollar underscore CSRF. It should be, this is not the curly bracket, CSRF, right, dot token, right? Let's save this. Well, it should be hidden, right? It should be a type of hidden parameter. I will say hidden, right? Let's save this. Now let's try to access the form again. I will say form, right? Now let's try to submit this form and let's see if it works. Yeah, so we are able to submit this form correctly now, and there is no forbidden error. Now, if you see here carefully, if you go to the page source, you can see that this CSRF token is added, right? So this is what the name that we saw. This is the parameter name, which is underscore CSRF, and this is the token, right? So this is how we can add the CSRF to the form request. Now, another way to do or to deal with the CSRF in time leaf is you can simply use the time leaf form instead of a simple form. If you are using a simple form, then in that case you have to use this all the time. You have to pass this CSRF token in the parameter, or or utilize this token from the parameter to your form. For example, let's say if you are using a JSP or any other technology, then in that case you can do this, right? Another way is time leaf automatically include this, right? So I will just comment this. Let's comment this and I will say form, right? And instead of action, I will say th action, right? And I will simply add at the rate slash submit, right? This is the time-lapse syntax which we are using, right? And method is a post. So I will simply copy and paste this. Okay. Now we don't need this here. So I will simply just comment this, right? And let's try to refresh our page again. I will close this and access this. Now, if you click on a view page source, you can see here, right? The CSRF is already included, and this is what we have commented, right? So, and if you run this, it will still work, right? So here, the time leaf automatically adds the CSRF. You don't need to add this token explicitly on your page. So this is how we can use the CSRF in the form submission kind of a request, right? So basically CSRF is an important section if you want to add the extra level of a security in your application, right? So there are some advantages of using the time leaf. If you are using it, definitely it will utilize the CSRF. You don't need to update it. For example, let's say if your application is already there without CSRF, and if you want to utilize the CSRF and you have hundreds of HTML pages, right? You have to make update to each and every HTML, right? So that is not a feasible, or maybe it's a bit difficult. You have to add a lot of extra code, a common code, right? In that case, simply using the time lapse syntax, it will automatically add the CSRF and your application will work, right? So this is with the CSRF with a form submission. So whatever the CSRF token that we used so far on the web page or on the REST-based controller, those tokens are stored in some kind of a repository. So Spring already has predefined repositories at its end, and the default repository which is used by the Spring is HTTP session CSRF token repository. You can override this repository and use your repository. So let's see how we can simply override this. So what we'll do is I will simply create a bean method, and I will say public CSRF token repository, right? And I will say CSRF token repository. This is the method, right? And this will be the default repository, which is HTTP session CSRF token repository. Okay, I will say repository, right, equal to new, right? And we will set our header name here. So repository dot set header name, which is x hyphen CSRF hyphen token, right? There are two names. You can also use, this should not be C, this should be X. It's X CSRF token repository, right? And another name can be, we'll say X XSRF token. Okay, both are the same, right? Now, next is we'll just return this repository. Okay, and we can simply set this repository here, right? So I will say CSRF token repository, which is CSRF token repository. So this will also works in this case, right? If you want to override this repository, you can override this and create your own repository, which also be okay, right? So what in that case, what we can do is I will simply just comment this, and I will say, let me copy this, and here I will say new, I will say custom CSRF token repository, right? So this is the new class. So you have to override this class, right? And then you can create your own repository. So this basically, it means that you are using your own repository instead of Spring default repository. Now this class will definitely implement the CSRF token repository, and you have to provide the definition of these three methods. How you going to generate the CSRF token, where you are storing this token, and how are you loading this token once you get the request. Okay, so this is just for your application-based development if you don't want to use already existing classes. Okay, so this is how we can use a custom CSRF token repository. So I hope you understand how to use the CSRF in a Spring Boot application. All the source code which I demonstrated in this session is available on my GitHub repository, and you can find the link of GitHub on the description section below. If you think this information is valuable, please do like and share this video. Thanks for watching, and I will see you on the next one.